Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel, or if it is your first time, it is so nice to meet you. Welcome especially. I'm Sally. Today we're going to be diving into part 3 of my Pro-Metabolic for Beginners series. Now, if you haven't checked out parts 1 or 2, they are linked in the description box. I highly encourage you to go visit those or at least return to them at the end of this video. But today's video is going to be a little bit shorter than those because we're just going to focus in on 2 specific things that are kind of top level. Now, they're still very, very beneficial and very, very important, pretty, level, I would say, with the part 2, we'll say things that we talked about, but I'm considering them distinct and giving them their own video because these are things that it's a little bit harder sometimes to find from things that we are just, consuming on a regular basis. And sometimes we have to be a little bit more intentional to go out of our way in terms of supplementation. And those 2 things are going to be magnesium and they are going to be beef liver. Now, beef liver, the benefit that's coming from that is really going to be your copper and your vitamin A in the form of retinol. And of course, you have iron in there. I've talked about this before, but the best, thing about beef liver as a form of those nutrients or a way of getting those nutrients is not only are they super bioavailable, the copper and the vitamin A are really essential to our iron absorption and to also protecting our body from, oxidation from excess iron. And so it's a lovely little package and probably the best way to supplement those things. But we're going to get to that second. Let's start with magnesium. And I do just want to say I chose these 2 things because bearing in mind, I'm not a dietitianist, I am not a nutritionist or anything like that. I'm just sharing with you the research I have done. And from that research, it really seems like these are 2 things that just about anybody can implement without having, testing done ahead of time to kind of see where their mineral levels are at and see benefits, from adding them in safely. Obviously within the proper constraints, like we need to stay within a certain amount of beef liver, for instance, within a week. We don't want to eat too crazy much of it, but okay, that's where we're coming from here. Let's talk about magnesium. So magnesium is a super duper critical mineral and our body burns through it when we're stressed. And that stress can be, a physical stress, like, if you are hurt or even if you are exercising, if you are on your feet all day and just have a lot going on, like literally enduring that physical stress to your body, but it can also be a mental stress or a spiritual stress or anything like that. So something that's causing you anxiety and the more mental kind of stress that we would usually talk about, thinking I have too much on my plate, I'm too busy. Busyness is a big culprit, especially when we are living in that sympathetic state for too long, that fight or flight kind of state of being for more than we necessarily need to be, when our cortisol levels are elevated, which, let's be honest, in this day and age, most of our cortisol levels are elevated higher than they should be, higher than they need to be. We are just burning through that magnesium. And on the flip side of that, when it comes to, getting that, where is that being replaced? It can be really, really hard through our diets because even the whole food sources do include it or do contain it, things such as cacao, avocados, just to name a couple. Our soil is depleted enough that we really do not see adequate levels of it in our food, even, if it is really, really grown in a high quality situation, regenerative farming, anything like that. Like, it's still very hard to get enough of that particular nutrient through food. So that's where supplementation comes in. And there are about 1,000 different forms of magnesium that you can supplement with. I personally use 2 forms. I use a topical magnesium that can take the form of something like an Epsom salt or like a spray. I've shared this before. Let me grab it real quick. And I will link this for you. in the description box. But here's my topical magnesium. It's nothing fancy, but it is, I always forget, there we go, magnesium chloride is the form. So just a magnesium salt essentially dissolved in water, and that's what, those Epsom salts are is going to be magnesium chloride, but in its crystal form. Then you dissolve it in water. And even though you're putting that on topically, and generally it's going to be used to help with, muscle soreness is the typical application topically, it is getting into your system and can help with your magnesium levels. So if you've never done any sort of magnesium supplementation before, that can be a great place to start. And it's not going to mess, with your digestion in a way that sometimes adding different forms of internal or an oral magnesium might do so. That being said, to take magnesium chloride by mouth orally is not recommended. It is usually only used for specific laxative purposes. And magnesium, why can't I remember all the names? There's another form that's like super, super common. I can pop that up here on the screen, but another form of magnesium that you're gonna see a lot of the time that just our bodies really, really can't absorb. So when it comes to the forms that we can't absorb, there are gonna be two things in particular that at least have been recommended to me. Those are gonna be magnesium glycinate, which is the one I take, and magnesium malate. And these work slightly differently in our bodies, but overall are all going to help us build up those stores. It's just magnesium malate has actually been said by some people at least to have a bit of an energizing effect. So oftentimes people will take that kind of towards the morning, and then magnesium glycinate is really known to have a relaxing, calming effect, and be a really noticeable, actually tangible effect on stress. And that's what I take. I still take it in the morning. It doesn't make me sleepy or anything, but sometimes people will choose to take this in the evening to help wind down. So pardon the jangle of the pills, but this is the one that I have right now. It's just from Whole Foods, and they are pretty big pills. You can find them smaller and then just take more of them. I'll show you. But it's recommended to take, 3 of these a day. Often I will just take 2. You can definitely, do as much as 3. The thing to consider about magnesium, this form and malate less than other forms, but something still to keep in mind, is going to be that, just as we talked about with the Epsom salts, if taken orally, sometimes people notice a difference in their bowel movements, softer stools. And I did notice when I first started taking this, things were a little bit, smoother going, we will say, than it had been in the past. So it can even be helpful for constipation. But if you're noticing that things are like upset, or that you're experiencing diarrhea or anything like that, scaling back a little bit, maybe starting with the topical application, or taking just, in the case of these pills, like 1, 2 instead of 3 right off the bat, that's going to be helpful. Bear in mind with any of this that starting somewhere, even if it is not the like recommended by the bottle or by any particular standard amount, is better than, starting nowhere. So that's magnesium for you. And if you have any questions about any of this, please just leave them in the description box. I'm always happy to kind of get into that either not in the description, in the comments. Happy to get into that either in the comments or in another video. But now I want to talk about beef liver. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, beef liver is this really, really awesome tool, nature's multivitamin, many people call it, because it packages up 3 things for us in a really neat little way. We've got our iron, of course, but then we've got copper and vitamin A in the form of retinol, and these are the 2 real superstars. So oftentimes, actually, when people, are thinking they're anemic or having some sort of issue with that, it isn't just that they don't have enough iron in their bodies. Sometimes even if it's not showing up on a blood test, you have a lot of iron that's stored in your tissues. And so iron won't be the issue, but it's the fact that our bodies can't metabolize it correctly or can't absorb it correctly. Copper and vitamin A are really, really essential to that. And those are things that we are often not getting enough of, especially in a world where we're usually not eating a lot of shellfish, and a lot of people aren't eating dairy. Dairy is going to be a good source of that vitamin A. And I have specified just a minute ago, we're talking about retinol, not beta carotene. Beta carotene is great, but our bodies have to work harder to convert that, whereas retinol is what is serving this specific purpose. 2 different things, and that, needs to be understood. So the other thing about copper is that it helps to kind of combat oxidative stress that is caused by iron. If you think about, what happens in the environment when iron is, out there left, to the elements mixed with oxygen, you see rust. And it's not, literally that you're getting red rust inside your body, but there is oxidative stress that is caused from that reaction, that interaction between iron and oxygen. And so while it is a really important mineral for us to have, we're really missing a part of the picture just to go ham with the iron supplementation, but not to get those other 2 key components. And beef liver, again, super bioavailable way for us to get all three of these things. So let's talk about, when we're sourcing our beef liver, what that should look like and how we might actually consume it, because I know that can be a big challenge, and I'll be upfront with you, I do not like the way it tastes. I was hoping maybe I would be able to convince myself. We're not there yet. I just don't like it, but I have found some hacks that really help. So in terms of sourcing, we always want to make sure that we are consuming grass-fed, pasture-raised beef liver, because this is helping to prevent any toxins. It's making sure none of those toxins that we don't want in our bodies are in the beef liver. There's a huge difference in just the fats and the building blocks, we'll say, of meat as a whole that is grass-fed versus primarily corn-fed or primarily grain-fed, and that affects our bodies, and that's especially evident in an organ such as the liver. And so I just get mine from Whole Foods. You can get it in the freezer section. It is not expensive at all. Don't remember how much, but it's I want to say $5 for a pound or something. And when you're only eating 4 ounces a week is the kind of max recommendation that I am familiar with, and that I go by, that really, isn't a lot at all. So I get it from the freezer section, and then what I do most days is I thaw it out ahead of time, at least part way, and then I'm gonna cut it up into little teeny tiny pieces. I've made a whole video on this that I can link here somewhere so you can check it out. I cut it into little teeny tiny pieces, and then I just freeze those pieces and I swallow them whole, like I'm taking a pill. Some people will actually thaw it out and swallow it, thawed or partially thawed, so it's less likely to get stuck in your throat. You might just have to experiment a little bit. I found if the pieces are small enough, I don't have a problem with it, and I can put multiple in my mouth at one time. You just want to make sure you, again, cut them up small enough to begin with. So that's a really great hack. It's been really helpful to me. Some people will even throw these in their smoothies. I haven't tried that yet. I am very sensitive to flavors. I'm not picky at all, but I just tend to pick things out, we will say. And so I don't feel like that would be the move for me, but again, that works really well for some people. The other way that we could use, beef liver is maybe not raw, but we could cook it into some of our other meats. So I've done this with tacos, with meatloaf. I haven't tried sausage yet, but you can simply grind it up in your food processor and combine it with your ground beef or your ground pork before putting it into, or before cooking those things into whatever form they're gonna go in. And the more seasoning you have, obviously, the better it's going to be. So those are 2 ways that I kind of get beef liver into my diet without tasting it. There is kind of a richness and earthiness that is added to the meatloaf and to the tacos when you add the beef liver, but it's not oh, that's liver, if that makes any sense. And I will just say there's benefit in consuming it both raw and cooked. It is, said that you're getting the most nutrients from it if it is raw, and so that's why the raw liver shots are a great little hack, and also because you don't taste it. But again, just as we talked about with that magnesium, it's far better to do something than to do nothing, and cooking it is still great. So throwing it into a dish can be awesome, or if you just like the taste of it and want to cook it up like that, then awesome. We should also note here that there are different forms of liver. Beef liver, great, has the highest levels of that copper and vitamin A. I think both of those things, but there's chicken liver and there is duck liver, and those are also going to be great, especially if you just cannot tolerate the taste of beef liver. I know for myself, I've had chicken liver pate, and I like that very well. Beef liver pate, can't stand it. It's disgusting. There's a whole thing about it. If you want to check out my Instagram, you can watch the liver saga. But chicken or duck liver might be a great place to start. Just bear in mind, we still want to make sure those are sourced really well. And I honestly have not been able to find chicken or duck liver where I live, which I was surprised by, but that's just, how it goes. So that's where I'm at, but you can do the same thing with either of those. And honestly, that's it, y'all. I know it's nothing too crazy, just getting into kind of those 2 top level additions that I think most, if not anybody, most people, if not anybody, could benefit from, making to their diet. So I hope it's helpful. If y'all have any questions, like I said before, leave them in the comments. Aside from that though, that's all for me. I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.